next up, we're going to talk about the 2023, most likely the number one pick, Victor Wembanyama. Everybody's been talking about him all across social media, and he's, without a doubt, one of the most interesting prospects that we've seen in a while. 7'4", can shoot and handle the ball, plays like KD mixed with Rudy Gobert. And so I want to ask you, Jake, who do you think, or who would you like to see get Victor?
Well, this early in the season, it's kind of tough to gauge who are some of these teams that will be up at the top of the lottery because, I mean, early on you see teams like your 76ers who are 0-3, and it's not like we really expect Philadelphia to be in that running for Victor anyways, but you would think a team like the San Antonio Spurs, maybe the Charlotte Hornets if they start to fall off after losing Miles Bridges, maybe a team like the Utah Jazz, like we talked about, trying to actively ship off good players at the trade deadline potentially. So all of those teams, there's really no team in the NBA that couldn't use Victor because of just his overall talent and kind of ceiling. But I think those teams are really the teams who are kind of going into the season already looking at, hey, we need to move some of these top players on our team to go get this guy.
Yeah. I think another thing I want to talk about too is like, you might be the worst team, but there's a chance that you still won't even end up getting Victor. So it could be like somebody who ends up in the play-in or just borderline play-in team. And if it's somebody like the Pacers or somebody who already kind of has a young core in the making, like the Pistons or Magic, if they get either Victor or Scoot Henderson, I think both of those guys will be great. If they get one of those, I think that's really going to be scary, not only for their potential, but just for the league in general.
And it's kind of rare to see some of these high-key outlets really focus on players before they even get into like their college-eligible season. Like you see it in the past with LeBron James when he was in high school, saw it a little bit with Zion, maybe on SportsCenter Top 10 with some of those highlights, but even Zion didn't really get that much attention until he started showing out at Duke. It's pretty rare to see Victor, who had already been getting posted on like House of Highlights and Bleacher Report when he was like 16 years old over in France, just destroying people.
I remember one of the first times I heard of Victor, it was that one-on-one video of him playing against Rudy Gobert, and I think that's when everybody kind of realized, oh, when this guy comes around, he's going to be an issue. And then I remember seeing stuff last year as well, like it was like when this guy's draft class comes up, we know he's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I actually have a question for you guys regarding Victor Wembanyama because he is insane. And I think this is probably pretty obvious, but is there, to you guys, a single team in the NBA that would pass on him if they got that first overall pick? Like, let's say they have like talent at that position. In my opinion, I don't think that's really a reality.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. Like, you look at a team, Brandon, like the Thunder. I mean, you just drafted Chet Holmgren number 2, but are you really going to pass up on potentially teaming up a Chet Holmgren with a Victor Wembanyama just because they're so similar? I don't know if you can do that.
I feel like with Victor too, he's a player like he can do so many things, so I feel like he can play a lot more positions and he can fit into so many different roles. So I feel like just the versatility that he has, it makes him so much harder to pass up on. I can't even picture like, say somehow like the Bucks or the Warriors end up winning the chip this year and they get the first pick. I feel like they wouldn't want to pass up on that just because it also sets up your future so well.
I almost wonder like this would just not happen, you would imagine, just because any team would want to have Victor. But the team that wins that number 1 pick in this lottery, I wonder, like, would a team like the Thunder really just say, have the rest of our first-round picks that we've traded for all these years? Would that even be enough for a team to move out? Because I feel like Victor has so much pull in terms of, like, how much money will come into your organization just by drafting him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, a trade at number 1 would be crazy with this Victor Wembanyama class, but I mean, the amount of picks and players that teams would be willing to give up. I mean, star players, like, I guarantee you the Wizards would trade Bradley Beal straight up for the number 1 pick. And like that is an elite player getting traded for someone we've never even seen play in the NBA yet.
Victor Wembanyama is literally the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket. Like, I'm not even joking. It's just insane. And I think through the season, you guys are probably going to continuously talk about, or at least I know, Jake, you're even on the fence saying he might be the best prospect well, maybe not the best prospect of all time, but better than LeBron as a prospect.
I mean, if LeBron is not the best prospect of all time, he's got to be at least number 2. And if Victor's better than that, I don't know where that puts him all time, but I would honestly, the way that he plays and his kind of measurables that are unmatched in terms of prospects in the past, I mean, it's pretty hard not to say he's the best draft prospect of all time.
I would just like to say, if we're going to get into the greatest of all times, I think that just this class in general, the way it stacks up outside of Victor, starting with Scoot, and then you go down the list to guys like Derek Whitehead, Nick Smith Jr., Cam Whitmore, and of course the Thompson twins. Like, the way this class is stacked up, they have so much star potential, and I think if you moved a lot of those guys around, they would be first picks in other draft classes. And so I think that just speaks to the talent as a whole of this class. And I don't want, Victor's great, obviously, like, we know that, but I don't want some of these other guys in the class to be overlooked, because I think that there's a lot of hidden gems in there as well.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think if there was ever one year for a bad team to decide to fully tank, it would definitely be this year, like you talked about. This is arguably the best draft class of all time, potentially. And Adam Silver kind of got into that a little bit, talking about they're really working to figure out how to stop these teams from tanking for these top-level prospects. But, I mean, can you really stop these teams when you have a prospect like Zion Williamson or LeBron James, or like we're talking about Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, others in this own draft class? There's really no way you can incentivize teams not to lose, because, I mean, you can't force teams to get a certain amount of wins. That's just not how it works.
Yeah. And a lot of these teams that are tanking, they just don't have the talent to win basketball games as it is. Like, namely the Spurs, like, they have a few young guys, but outside of that, it's just like they're just not a good basketball team. So of course they're gonna, they're gonna try to get Victor. And they're not even doing it like intentionally. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and I don't know what options the NBA are looking at. Like, some drastic ones would maybe be if they determine that this team, like whatever team is tanking on purpose, could they potentially make some sort of move where they maybe like discard your draft pick that you've been tanking for all year? That would be such a drastic change to the league. If the league offices are able to just determine whether or not your team tried hard enough in the season, that would completely shift the NBA draft process as a whole.
I feel like it'd start getting messy, and you'd have to start looking into doing investigations, and those can take a long time. So even say like somebody does tank for that year, they might conclude the investigation like a year or two later, and then they'll get their pick taken away after they've already tanked for whoever they wanted. So it's just like, what are they going to do? And
when it comes to Victor, is there really, like, wouldn't that be worth it, you would almost think?
Yeah.
Then again, though, if you do tank, the massive thing about the NBA that I always find so interesting is the fact that it is a lottery draft. You could be the worst team by far. No other team is coming close to as bad as you are in a season, and you're picking 5 overall.
Yeah.
And that's the most likely outcome. You look at the odds, it's around 50% if you're the number 1 pick to drop to pick number 5. But like Branden said, I agree with you really that this draft class is, especially within the top 10, it is completely worth tanking for any of these players, because like you said, most of these guys would be top 5 picks in really any other draft class. So even if you fall to maybe 6, 7, or 8, you're still getting a really good player. And a lot of times those mid-lottery teams have those young talent that are just waiting to develop. And if you could add somebody like one of the Thompson twins or Derek Lively or Nick Smith, I think your team takes a huge jump in the next few years.